Putin claims nonsense on the meeting with Fico in Beijing. The Kremlin's summer offensive fails and the US steps up support. Long-range weapons Starlink and Patriot tech headed to Ukraine. We will tell you more in this episode, so you'll be in focus. Stay with us for the latest updates and exclusive reports. Russian dictator Putin meets Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico in Beijing. Putin claimed that, I quote, Russia has never had, does not have, and will never have any intention to attack anyone. He described statements by European leaders about the threat posed by Russia as either provocations or complete incompetence. Once again, Putin referred to the war in Ukraine merely as a conflict, claiming it has nothing to do with Russia's aggressive behavior and is instead a consequence of the West allegedly supporting a coup in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russia attempts to launch offensive along the entire front line, but there has been no recorded progress. This is according to a report by the Institute for the Study of War. The Kremlin's summer offensive campaign has ended in failure. However, Moscow refuses to acknowledge this and deliberately presents a distorted picture on the front line in order to convince Western countries of its so-called inevitable victory. More on this in our report.
Russia's latest seasonal offensive has ended in failure. That's how Ukraine's general staff described the spring-summer campaign of Russian forces. Over the course of several months, the Russian military lost thousands of units of military equipment and hundreds of thousands of personnel. Meanwhile, Ukraine's defense forces continue to hold the front and demonstrate that no amount of Kremlin propaganda can hide the failure of Russia's offensive, the general staff concluded.
Russian troops have not gained full control over a single major city. Since the beginning of the year, in senseless battles across Kharkiv, Luhansk, and Donetsk regions, Russia has lost nearly 210,000 soldiers, killed or wounded. Also destroyed or damaged were 2,174 armored combat vehicles, 1,201 tanks, 7,303 artillery systems, and 157 multiple launch rocket systems. From the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Telegram. Gerasimov has once again been forced to regroup, adjust timelines, redefine objectives, and recalculate forces and resources, because the forces allocated for the offensive have effectively been burned out in attempts to break through Ukrainian defenses. Without regrouping, they won't succeed.
Despite heavy losses and a clear lack of tangible results, Russian Chief of General Staff Valery Gerasimov declared that the offensive will continue. According to him, the initiative currently lies with Russian forces. He explained the lack of territorial gains by claiming that Ukrainian troops held them back at great cost. However, he made no mention of Russian losses. In fact, some Russian units remain encircled in Donetsk region for nearly 2 weeks now, following a failed breakthrough attempt against Ukrainian defenses.
We're not just clearing areas. We're also launching small counteroffensives in these sectors. The enemy cannot maintain offensive operations there. They're trying to push from the northeast and southwest of Pokrovsk, but over several days of attempts, they've seen no real success. There are minor positional shifts on both sides, but the enemy is suffering the heaviest losses.
The Russian leadership appears indifferent to the losses. Their goal, to create the illusion of momentum and deceive Kiev's allies. According to the Institute for the Study of War, General Gerasimov consistently inflates battlefield gains. He claims that since the beginning of the year, Russian forces have captured 3,500 square kilometers and nearly 150 populated areas. However, analysts say the real figures are about half of that. Russia's new defense minister, Andrei Belousov, echoed similar claims in late August, stating that Russian troops are seizing 600 to 700 square kilometers monthly. Experts put the actual number at a more modest 440 to 500 square kilometers per month during the summer.
The Kremlin appears to be trying to use large amounts of quantitative data to create the false impression that Russian forces are advancing at a fast rate on the battlefield. The Kremlin is trying to convince the West that Russia will inevitably achieve its war goals on the battlefield, such that Ukraine should concede to Russian demands and the West should therefore cease its support of Ukraine. From the Institute for the Study of War report.
Kiev's partners, however, aren't falling for these Russian tactics. On the contrary, they continue ramping up military support for Ukraine. This year alone, Ukraine is set to receive up to 3,500 ERAM missiles with associated equipment and services under a deal worth $825 million authorized by the U.S. Defense Security Cooperation Agency.
We're giving some deeper strike capabilities and most likely the Ukrainians are going to use them.
In addition to this new U.S. military support, the PURL program has come online. Under this initiative, European NATO members and Canada jointly purchase U.S. weapons for delivery to Ukraine. According to President Volodymyr Zelensky, this defense initiative has already raised $1.5 billion in support for Ukraine. Reported by Nikita Skoblikov, UATV News.
And again to the Putin-Fico's meeting, and again to Putin's claims, after Fico responded, or rather expressed sympathy to Putin regarding Ukrainian attacks on the Druzhba oil pipeline, and said he would also discuss the issue with Zelensky during their meeting on Friday. Putin in turn declared that Russia would retaliate by targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Russian Giran drones equipped with cameras are already conducting reconnaissance to determine how best to strike Ukrainian power stations before winter sets in. Putin is also demanding that Europe cut off gas and oil supplies to Ukraine in order to stop Ukrainian attacks on energy facilities. But will anyone in Europe actually listen to him, especially now as the EU prepares yet another package of sanctions? Meanwhile, the United States is providing Ukraine with weapons capable of striking targets deep inside Russia, according to the U.S. ambassador to NATO Matthew Whitaker, speaking on Fox News. Previously, he did not rule out an increase in military aid to NATO member states. At the same time, the U.S. State Department has approved a potential sale to Ukraine of Starlink communication services and Patriot system equipment worth over $300 million. More details to follow from our correspondent.
The administration of U.S. President Donald Trump is increasing military aid to Ukraine, stated U.S. Ambassador to NATO Matthew Whitaker on Fox News on August 29th. According to him, a new batch of weapons worth nearly $1 billion is already en route to Ukraine. Additionally, Washington ensures monthly deliveries to Kyiv of approximately $1 billion worth of weapons through NATO allies. Beyond military aid, the White House continues to work diplomatically to end Russia's war against Ukraine, Whitaker noted.
And I think one of the things you mentioned, in addition to the $1 billion in arms that have been sold directly to Ukraine, there's also, U.S. is selling about $1 billion a month through our NATO allies that are being provided to Ukraine. And so President Trump's making sure, one, that Ukraine can continue to defend itself, and by giving them some deeper strike capabilities that obviously could help them offensively. They've already taken out about 20% of Russia's oil refining capacity in the last month. And at the same time, he has so many other cards to play.
Washington has approved the sale of Patriot air defense systems to Denmark, which Copenhagen intends to transfer to Kyiv. The deal is valued at $8.5 billion, according to the U.S. Department of Defense's Security Cooperation Agency. Previously, the Netherlands made similar purchases. Additionally, the U.S. State Department has approved the sale to Ukraine of equipment and support services for the Patriot system, as well as Starlink satellite communications. Specifically, $179 million will be allocated for maintenance and modernization of the air and missile defense system, including spare parts, software, and training for Patriot. Another $150 million will go toward purchasing Starlink communication services.
Putin has been involved in negotiations for 6 months. And the reality is he talks peace. I'm assuming he's very convincing in his discussions with Special Envoy Witkoff and with the president and his team when he's met with them in person and also on the phone. And that's one thing. But while he's talking peace, he obviously makes war. And his focus of the war. But what he has done is escalated the war against the people of Ukraine. And it's horrific. It is a war crime. Maximum sanctions. But also, we should unleash as much offensive weapons for Ukraine to use in deep attack into Russia.
On August 29th, the Pentagon approved another deal with Kyiv, involving ERAM air-launched cruise missiles with a range of up to 450 kilometers. The contract is valued at $825 million.
This proposed sale will improve Ukraine's capability to meet current and future threats by further equipping it to conduct self-defense and regional security missions. Ukraine will have no difficulty absorbing these articles and services into its armed forces, from a statement from the U.S. Department of Defense Security Cooperation Agency website.
According to the Pentagon, the funding for the weapons will come from Denmark, the Netherlands, Norway, and the U.S. Foreign Military Financing Program. Germany previously agreed to allocate $500 million for American weapons supplies to Ukraine under NATO's Pearl Initiative. Russia will only stop its war against Ukraine when it is unable to continue for military and economic reasons, stated German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. He highly praised the unity of Europeans in discussions regarding Ukraine.
We decided at the NATO summit in The Hague in June that we would work towards strengthening the European part of NATO, that we would try to keep the Americans in Europe, but also that we would say, yes, we are prepared to make a major contribution ourselves to our defense, our security, and our freedom.
On August 29th, Friedrich Merz and French President Emmanuel Macron emphasized that U.S. President Donald Trump must respond if the summit he announced between Ukraine and Russia does not take place. However, on August 30th, the White House leader stated that a bilateral meeting between President Volodymyr Zelensky and Putin is unlikely in the near future. Nevertheless, he believes trilateral negotiations involving the United States will occur. Reported by Kristina Dombrovska, UATV News.
What's your take on all of this? Share your thoughts below. This is UATV. Stay sharp, in focus, and stay safe.